Meaningful metrics on Off the Ball.
In partnership with Whoop, the personalised digital fitness and health coach that helps you unlock your inner potential. See whoop.com for more.
Okay, really only one place that we could be doing meaningful metrics about this week, and that is the All Ireland Hurling Final.
Yeah.
Michael, good evening to you.
How are you, Ger?
Welcome back.
Thanks very much. I've enjoyed this. I've been digging into the All Ireland Final, past and present.
Yeah.
Spent a lot of time on, just looking at historical games and historical little storylines. And my God, the tangents and branches you can go off on that aren't relevant to this at all, that aren't in the printout in front of you and aren't going to be talked about here. But you find out an awful lot of interesting little things when you go searching into the 19th century. And then you realise, I don't have time for this.
But you make the time anyway. That's the whole point of a wormhole.
Yeah.
Tell us, drop some factoids on me that aren't on your sheet.
I don't know if I actually see. This is the thing. I have to take them out of my brain entirely so that I can make sure I can give you actual meaningful metrics and not meaningless. But just like little things like when replays were played and stuff. But I'm going to go down
3 years later, kind of thing.
Oh, ridiculous! So we'll get to that now in a second, right? So there's a lot made of the fact that the final this year is being played on the 17th of July, a rather unique date for an All Ireland final.
Too hot for hurling.
It's going to be 30 degrees. Now, it's not too hot for a Munster final, but our heat waves do tend to happen at the end of July, and they do tend to happen more regularly than they used to be. So this was could be forecast, I suppose, in some ways. So it's going to be interesting.
What if the split season? Hear me out. Was club first? So if you had a really good club season, you could play for your county. What if we did it that way, and then the All Ireland final was at the end of October?
Yeah, why not? And you have still kind of like
Croker.
June, July. There's talk of Croker not being sold out this weekend, which I've never really known for an All Ireland final.
Really?
There's definitely discussion about it. I'm not sure the exact details, but an awful lot of people are on holidays at the moment.
It's true.
And
It's
people
true.
go on holidays, and also like there's things happening in every town in the country in July. You know what I mean? People are getting out of Dublin for various different reasons, and staying in their home place for various different reasons. So yeah, it's not the ideal time for a final. Is it the ideal time in the GAA calendar? I suppose we can all have that conversation at the end of the year. See how the club finals go. But going back to the July final, right? It seems unique, and we all, up until recently, it was September, first Sunday in September. Digging into it, right? First All Ireland final, the 1887 championship, played in 1888. By 1922, which was the 1920 championship, all 12 months had hosted an All Ireland final.
Right.
Yeah, so, but July actually only won, tied for the bottom of the list up until this weekend, with May and February as the only ones to ever hold one final. So they're kind of but this is a really interesting story, Ger. The only July final, right, should have been in 1911 between Kilkenny and Limerick.
Right, there you go.
Yeah, except it wasn't. It was played in 1912, and it wasn't played between Kilkenny and Limerick.
Okay.
Kilkenny and Limerick's first game was called off due to an unplayable pitch, probably because they used to play them in the depths of winter back then, right? Then it was reset many months later. This is the other thing. When you dig into these things, there's replays are played like 4 or 5 months after the original game. The replay was set for Thurles. Limerick, for some reason, refused, and I haven't found that much information about this, refused to play the game in Thurles, which meant that game was cancelled.
Yeah.
It's close enough to Limerick too, though. So that game was cancelled.
Tipperary, so imperialist that Limerick Junction is actually in Tipperary.
Absolutely, right. So that game was cancelled then and reset, but not with Limerick. Tipperary were appointed as Kilkenny's opponents, and Kilkenny duly won the only ever July All Ireland final. So 1 up to Kilkenny on the meaningful metrics.
100 years ago.
110 years ago.
Sorry,
yeah. So
last decade.
September, obviously the most All Ireland finals, right? So just allow me on one of the tangents here, just on when All Ireland finals are played, right? Obviously September miles ahead of everything else, right? But the first Sunday in September didn't happen, and that tradition didn't really start until 1927,
right? And
then more or less kept going. There's obviously the odd year where it didn't happen. The first final for September happened in 1904. It was the 1902 final. Now that's actually very, very common. We didn't catch up on our years until 1909, was the first year played in the proper calendar year. It slipped again then during the wars, which is why it was the 1922 thing I was saying. In 1923, we had 2 All Ireland Hurling Finals played within 5 days of each other.
Did we have a minor situation like that last year? Did somebody win 2
under
minors in a
20s,
week?
I think,
Under
wasn't it?
20s?
Yeah, Cork were in one. Yeah, definitely beat Dublin in one, and I think then there was another game. I think Cork might have won both of them, did they? But yeah, that was insane. So within 5 days of each other, you had one. Kilkenny played Tip, I think, in one, and then that was in 1922. That's the 100 years ago one. They won that, so it's another little anniversary for Kilkenny on that one. But then Galway beat Limerick 5 days later in the 1923 game, which is unbelievable. Oh, absolutely unbelievable. So that's they're my when games are played. So maybe all the people crowing about having a different time for an All Ireland final, they'd want to go back and have a look at the 19th century, Ger, and the early 20th century.
What is it? The UFC fanciers? They know your history. What was it? Anyway, not to start a war on another front tonight unnecessarily.
If only we had people that were like 150 years old.
Educate yourself. That's it. Educate yourself.
We could have so many brilliant features and all the madness that happened in like cancelled finals. And there's another one that went to a replay, and I've no idea why, even though Cork won it by a goal.
Right.
Yeah. So
Hawkeye.
Hawkeye. Yeah. Okay, 3 in a row. That's what Limerick are going for this year. Okay, so I've just looked back at the last 100 years in this. I didn't go down to the 19th century. I drew a line at 1922. Okay, so 17 teams have won back-to-back All Irelands in the last 100 years. Only 5 of them have gone on to do the 3 in a row. So that was Cork in 1943, Tip in 1951, Cork again in 54, Cork again in 78, and of course we all know Kilkenny in 2009, who would go on to win 4, as Cork did in the 50s as well. So that's just 29% of the teams that are going on to defend for the second time to go and win the 3 in a row. But of the teams that have made it back to the final, which we know Limerick definitely have, only 3 of those teams have lost. So that's a 62% win rate versus an overall 29% win rate.
Right, so if you make it back, more likely than not you're going to win, according to history.
And that was especially true up until 2004, which was the first. So this has actually happened. So that's, again, a pro-Limerick, and here's an anti-Limerick. Again, this is just history talking, not really specific to this week's game. Until 2004, when 3 times since then a team has made it to the final to go for the 3 in a row, having never done it before and lost. So that was Kilkenny lost to Cork in 2004, Cork lost to Kilkenny in 2006, and then Kilkenny lost to Tipperary in 2016 in like a 3 in a row that I don't think anybody would think that it was on Kilkenny's radar for the end of that era, but just shows you how many they've won. So that's what Limerick have ahead of them. Like they've made it back. 62% of teams that have made it back to go for the 3 in a row have gone on to win.
Maybe that whole great teams win 2, actually great teams win 3. Should that be the definition? Should we actually...
They win 3 in a row though, because Kilkenny have won 3 or Limerick have already won 3 and 4.
Yeah.
Which you might be caught on a day.
But I think they are a great team.
Yeah, I think 3 All Irelands in an era in 5 years odd.
What
happens if you win 2 All Irelands and then you're winning the All Ireland semi-final and the referee blows it up? Do you get counted as a great team then?
You're talking about Clare.
Oh, I wouldn't possibly be mentioned. I'm just a hypothetical.
And Jimmy Cooney.
Poor Jimmy Cooney.
What happens in that instance? Do we think of that Clare team as an all-time great team? I think we do.
Yeah.
But are they getting grandfathered in because of that controversy?
Yeah. Or is it just specific to each case?
They get in, but the Offaly team doesn't? Is that unfair?
Oh, that Offaly team.
Do you know?
So they get to another final.
They do.
You know, they're in a knockout championship with Wexford, one of the better Wexford teams in history. Kilkenny, you know, they could have made it in 93, won the All Ireland, and Offaly were unlucky to lose to them. Oh, I would say that is a great Offaly team. I don't know, maybe 2 is enough.
Is it? Are we too generous, I think?
Yeah, well, maybe, that's it. What defines great, I guess. There's a lot of good teams over the course of history. Do you want to talk a bit more about this year then?
Go for it.
And actual
relevance here.
I think it's about 2-1 to Kilkenny so far, but they don't really count.
So nobody recently has done the 3 in a row, apart from that Kilkenny team. Everybody else has been stopped.
Yeah.
Since. Okay.
Yeah, so Kilkenny won 4, but nobody else has done it since going back to, I think,
Cork and
Cork in the 70s. Yeah, Galway were the closest in 89 and obviously lost to Tip, and then there's those three teams that lost that I mentioned already, Cork and Kilkenny both times. Okay, so this year, you were asking me about goals earlier on, and I suppose the perception that Kilkenny are a bigger goal threat this year.
Well, it's been said. It's been said. Kilkenny have scored X amount of goals. Limerick have only scored this amount of goals, and therefore it's more part of their armoury than it is part of Limerick's. And everybody's like, "Oh yeah. That's I can see what's going on there." But apples and oranges is not apples and apples.
That's exactly right. So my fear on that was that, I suppose the the game against Liechtenstein doesn't count towards goal difference in World Cup qualifiers, and for a specific reason, We
did draw 0-0 with them, just
why did I pick on Liechtenstein there? God, I have to be more diplomatic in this.
Against the weakest team in the group, goal difference doesn't count. You take it out and everybody moves on.
So Kilkenny did get 7 goals in the 2 games against Laois and Westmeath. They got 5 against Westmeath, and a lot of them quite late. So it's unfair, really, because they are championship games, but just taking them out and just looking at the stats, trying to go a little bit more apples versus apples and go for the top tier teams, or what we would consider top teams in the championship. And Kilkenny do still have a better goal record than Limerick this season. So just in championship games alone, they've got 9 in their 5 games against the top tier teams, whereas Limerick have 7 in their 6 games. If you add in the league, again, you kind of take out Offaly games, you take out Antrim games, take out Laois games. Kilkenny have scored 16 games. This is overall now in Championship and League. Kilkenny have 16 goals in their 9 games, and Limerick have 9 in their 10. So Limerick didn't have a good league. We all know that. You don't want to write it out, but I'm just adding it in. They were already behind if you just look at Championship. So, Kilkenny have definitely a bigger goal threat. I suppose the question then is, how much does that make a difference in their actual matchup against each other? They haven't actually played this season.
I'm taking the league out. I'm saying that Limerick in the league were interested in getting players fit and creating a little bit of depth where they could possibly do that. And
I agree. Yeah,
everything was perfect for them. It was a perfect league. Everybody stupidly was like, "Oh, something's up. What's going on?" They're all narky, and they were like, "Yeah, we're always narky. We're just a little bit off. We're always narky. We're a little bit off, and we're narky anyway. So what's it to you?" Yeah. And then they've shoved that down everybody's throats, as great teams do. I think the 9 goals in 5 games and 7 goals in 6 games, it's slight advantage to Kilkenny, but not much.
It's a small sample size, isn't it? And games take their own route, and Limerick are a lot happier, I would say, and have what this stat tells me is that Kilkenny are probably more likely to score goals. However, it also, something that we know that isn't maybe a stats base, is that we know the type of player Limerick are more than happy, have more avenues to a high score, I would say, and are more than happy to, goals aren't on, we'll knock 30 points on you. So I think that's something that, whereas if you look at Kilkenny or Galway, Kilkenny in the Leinster final against Galway, I think got 10 points from play, and TJ Reid kind of added the rest of it. I think they got 22 points that day. There's been more low scoring in Leinster. Limerick are kind of more open to a shootout, so they might not need the goals, but Kilkenny definitely have an advantage from what we can see so far.
And you wouldn't be terribly surprised if Kilkenny come out with the idea that they're going to try and get goals early, and to be looking for goals early in this game. That
Which should make it pretty exciting.
It worked a little bit for Tipperary in the Munster Championship this year against Limerick, so maybe there is something there for them. You'll get blow-by-blow analysis, by the way, between 9 and 10 tonight. We're going to play a large chunk of this week's episode of the Hurling Pod. If you're not already subscribed to the Hurling Pod, well then, what the hell are you doing with your life? Something's gone wrong. You need someone to intervene. I'm doing that intervention right now for you. Get out your podcast app, search the Hurling Pod, and hit subscribe.
We all knew from last year, from the many times that you spoke to him, that James Gettle was a diamond in the rough. But Paul Murphy is right up there with him, and is getting more and more comfortable and better on that show every single week. So it's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, it's great.
Okay, what they won't tell you though is Limerick's advantage in back scoring, as in scores by backs. So there was actually a brilliant piece in the Examiner today from Christy O'Connor that people should check out on Dermot Burns's his prowess as a scorer. Now a lot of this obviously is from frees, but
where does Dermot Burns play?
Darren Burns plays right half back for Limerick, number 5, and he is one of the top scorers in the championship this year. Now, he is a prolific long free scorer. You take out free scorers obviously rack up scores, but he doesn't take the short in frees. Aaron Gallan takes them, but he takes everything out, and he's unbelievable, and he just adds so much to it. Just read a little bit from Christy O'Connor's, and then I'll get to the more general point. In 72 league and championship appearances, Burns has now amassed a colossal 2,159. Prior to this season, Burns' combined highest total was 31 points, amassed across 13 games in 2019. This is a league and championship. Yet he has already bagged 46 points in 11 games to date in 2022 and counting. He's a free-taking machine, but Burns has also scored 128 from play, which is an average of 1 point per match, which actually more or less correlates with what he scored so far this year in the championship. Prior to this year, Burns had only once recorded more than 3 points in a championship match, which was a 4-point haul in the 2021 Munster final against Tipperary. Yet he's hit 6 or more in 4 of Limerick's 6 championship games this season. So that's it's incredible how much they have leaned into this. Dermot Burns is going to score frees from everywhere, so let him take them. But he does score from play as well, and in general Limerick backs score from play a lot more than Kilkenny's. So I've just had a look at all the games, including Westmeath and Laois in this one, and just gone for all of the games so far. Limerick from play, so discounting Dermot Burns' frees, their backs, which is mainly Burns, Barry Nash and Declan Hannon, I think with 1 thrown in from Dan Morrissey, have scored 14 points from play in their 6 games this year. Kilkenny in their 7 games have got 1-6 from their backs, and I think 1-3 of that has come from Mikey Carey, who can be a little bit of a floater as well in terms of whether he's always playing wing back, you know. So it's not something that Kilkenny are contributing in. Their scores aren't coming from as many places as Limerick's are. Yeah.
A couple of things about this, right? If we were talking about Mayo football, it'd be like, oh, they must have no forwards. So, and it's like the points still count. And actually, sometimes when the defender is the one knocking it over a free from inside his own half, can you imagine how much of a letdown that is for the opposition? It's like, I'll foul you here, no big deal. Yeah. It's like, point, thanks very much. And then the other thing is about Kilkenny scoring all those frees, is like they had to win the frees. And the frees generally come from the defence being under pressure, or it's a scoring opportunity, really. Yeah. Like most of them are. And it's not like you can go out very consciously to play inside the edge and not give away those frees. Yeah. But what's the knock-on impact in terms of your team's aggression? So you go out with we're going to play on the edge and we're going to be aggressive, and then the referee starts pinging you for them. TJ puts it over from everywhere. TJ scored 5 points. Like, Kilkenny aren't really motoring here, but they are. Yeah. Because you've given up those 5 frees.
Oh, without a doubt, yeah. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, except for the fact that Limerick don't really score any less frees. You've got those Dermot Byrne frees. You got Gallan will hit his 3 or 4 a game, and they're putting that same pressure on. But I suppose they're so deadly from everywhere they get them. But also just adding in that kind of extra element of the Declan Hannon point in the Munster final.
Totally. Sorry, I was answering the imaginary point, which you didn't make, but I know people are making it. It was like, Kilkenny scored loads of points from frees, not from play against Clare. It doesn't matter.
No, and that was because they had Clare in desperate measures. That's why the Clare match is actually a very good example of how your frees are very much earned points, because domination leads to indiscipline. Yeah, as we'll see in the rugby again tomorrow, you would imagine. But we're talking about the scoring, right? And I've heard a good few places that Limerick aren't scoring as heavily, and whether that's an absence of Cian Lynch or whether it's just I don't know, if it's just a difference in style this year, or a difference in production maybe. And I just had a look at it, and it's like, right, 2018 they won the All Ireland. They've been the dominant team in hurling for those 4 seasons before this year. And I went through every championship game to see what they'd scored. And the difference isn't too much. Their average points per game, this is goals and points, from 2018 to 2021, the championship was 29.2 points per game. Their average in 2022, and this is 70 minutes only, I took away their extra time scores against Clare, is 28 points per game. It's really not too different, you know, and they haven't had any, like, exactly an easy run of things this year. They haven't played anybody who you would consider weaker or anything like that. So
they haven't had a blowout win yet.
They haven't really had a big blowout win at all, but they're still getting up to 28 points per game. They say you kind of want 30 to be winning championship games at the moment. I suppose the stats would suggest maybe 26, 27 will still win you most games. And against Kilkenny, who are definitely a lighter scoring team, although they weren't against Clare, where they got 226. You know,
easing up in the second half.
The game was over for a long time.
Yeah.
But yeah, look, I mean, Limerick's scoring has definitely not fallen off a cliff. 121 in both those games against Clare. A specific matchup, and it's 2 games, and that brings them down to 24 for those. So if you actually take the 2 Clare games out, and we know that those teams match up into a tighter battle.
Yeah, I suppose though, if you're
Kilkenny will also be that kind of team.
Yeah, if you're Kilkenny, you're looking at those 2 games, and you're looking at the Galway game where they scored 27 points, you know, with like 4 of them coming in stoppage time at the end of the game.
Yeah.
So their strength and conditioning is going to be an issue for any team. If you can live with them, you know, then they'll kill you with your hurling. So on balance, actually in the Munster Championship, they were scoring 31 points per game. They're down to 28 points now.
Well, kind of, yeah.
We should expect them to score 28 points.
That's, you know, well, based on the stats anyway, on the meaningful metrics.
Yeah.
You would suggest that that's kind of what they're at the moment, and I think more so is that they were considered they're ruining hurling. You know, they're scoring, so they're too heavy a scoring team. And not all that much.
The ball is
changed,
flying too fast.
I suppose is the point there.
The hurleys are too strong.
The hurleys are too strong. The balls are too light, but hurleys are too small. Now nobody talks about that. You know, people don't have to swing wildly anymore from 4 yards away.
Are they smaller? Much smaller?
Oh, much smaller. Conor Whelan has a 30 hurl.
Does he?
Right? And I think that was setting a trend 4 or 5 years ago when I heard that first. I think more and more are doing that now. 30. I used a 30 hurl when I was about 11.
Yeah.
You know? If that even, I'd say I was probably on 32 at that stage. You used to measure it up to your hip.
Yeah.
These guys now it barely gets over their knee.
Right.
You know, because they're just so well made and, you know, thicker with lighter wood. Yeah. So much more control over the ball. The last one
That's
I have.
the most meaningful thing you've said all night. I did not know this. Right.
There you go. Yeah, no. Conor Whelan, the 30 hurl is. I think it was a Cyril Farrell throwaway line from like 2018 or something like that when Conor Whelan was coming on the scene that I literally left my jaw on the floor. You know, and I've remembered ever since. But again, I think more and more are going for much smaller because again they can get so much control with it and they don't need the power anymore because 1, they're stronger and 2, the hurleys are way better built.
All right. I didn't know that. There you go. All right.
There you go. There's an accidental meaningful metric for you.
Brian Cody was a county, who'd he be?
If Brian Cody was a county, who will he be? Well, Limerick after this weekend, maybe, if Limerick win. So it's a 17th All Ireland Hurling Final. He's won 11. Limerick have 10 All Irelands and going for their 11th. He's also Wexford because this is his 17th final, which is the same as Wexford have managed in their history of their county, meaning only Limerick in their 20th, Tip, Cork, Galway, and of course, and Dublin. And actually, do you know what I've left out of this? Kilkenny, I suppose, have had more All Ireland finals, have been in more All Ireland finals than Brian Cody as a manager. I should point out because I'd say he definitely passes Limerick, and I'd say it just passes Limerick. I think if you add it in as a player, I wouldn't say he'd reach Galway. Galway have been in 25 finals. So, like Clare, Waterford, think of these like good hurling counties, Offaly.
Yeah, miles ahead.
All that. Brian Cody's been in more finals than them.
Antrim.
And then you take a winner, 11. Limerick would obviously equal that, as I mentioned, but he's already got more titles than Kilkenny, or than every county bar Kilkenny, Tip and Cork. So as we know, big three.
We look, take it for granted, obviously, and
but what we don't talk about is that John Kiley, a relatively unheralded 3-time All Ireland winning manager, I would say. Would you agree with that?
I don't know. I think people think they're very, very impressed by John Kiley. He's a very impressive character.
I think so.
But he's a bit under the radar.
A little bit, I think, you know.
Maybe.
He's not talked about the same cult as Cody anyway.
Well,
you know?
I think we're in the midst of it, right? And so the mythology builds up over a period of time. And I do think it has an impact. We haven't talked about this yet, but if they win this All Ireland in front of a relatively full house or close to a full house. Last year there was 40,000. The previous year there was nobody.
Yeah.
Do you know, it's going to be the most meaningful.
2018 was their breakthrough,
and so it was feverish. 2018. This is
very different. Yeah.
Well, I would say 2018 and this one are going to be the ones that, when you retire and look back and you've won loads more, you're like, those two were very special. That was our 3 in a row against Cody. So we were stopping him, stopping us from being stopped. And also, it was the first post relaxation of lockdown All Ireland, proper one. Because last year, loads of people in the crowd with masks, people with no masks, people being mask shamed both ways. And it's like, no one's even mentioning that stuff this year. It's just we're free. I don't know. I think so. Who else is on that list with 3?
Sarah Farrell, Pat Henderson of Kilkenny, and Bertie Troy of Cork. And nobody has any more than 3 other than Brian Cody. John Kiley wins this Sunday. He jumps to 2nd overall as the most All Irelands for one manager. It's pretty impressive.
It is very impressive.
But he hasn't done it yet. Brian Cody could go 12 with his nearest challengers having 3 if they win on Sunday. You know?
Yeah. Right.
12 finals.
It's
11
incredible. It is absolutely
17
incredible.
finals. What am I talking about?
It is absolutely incredible. All right, that's this week's Meaningful Metrics, and we hope that you enjoyed it. Meaningful Metrics and Off the Ball is in partnership with Whoop, the personalised digital fitness and health coach that helps you unlock your inner potential. See whoop.com for more.